The blood-red sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets of Redemption Creek as Vivian Summers stepped off the westbound train, her city clothes marking her as an outsider before she'd taken 10 steps. It was 1885, and the Arizona Territory was still as wild as the mustangs that roamed its plains. She clutched her valise tightly, eyes forward, shoulders squared, preparing herself for what she knew would come. Vivian had traveled all the way from Boston to claim the deed to her late uncle's general store, the only inheritance from a man she'd never met, but who had surprisingly remembered her in his will. What she hadn't expected was the reception waiting for her. The whispers started immediately. "That's her Henry Summers' niece. Fancy Eastern lady thinks she can run a store out here. Won't last a week." Vivian pretended not to hear as she made her way down the main street. The boardwalk creaked beneath her boots, and she could feel eyes boring into her back from every porch and window. A group of men lounged outside the saloon, and as she passed, one of them spat a stream of tobacco juice that landed inches from her skirt. "Pardon me," she said coldly, stepping around the puddle. The men laughed, and another glob of brown spit landed near her feet. Vivian kept walking, her cheeks burning with anger and humiliation. She'd been warned by her uncle's lawyer that Redemption Creek might not welcome her with open arms, but this was beyond what she had imagined. The general store stood at the end of the street, a 2-story wooden building with a faded sign that read, "Summers General Goods." The upper floor would be her new home, the lawyer had explained. As she approached, a tall figure stepped out from the shadows of the store's porch. "Miss Summers?" The voice was deep, with a hint of a southern drawl. Vivian stopped, wary. "Yes," the man stepped into the light. He wore a faded blue shirt, dust-covered pants, and a weathered Stetson that shadowed his features. When he tilted his head, she saw piercing blue eyes set in a tanned face framed by dark hair that curled slightly at the collar. "Isaac Reeves," he introduced himself with a slight tip of his hat. "Your uncle hired me to manage the store about a year before he passed. I've been keeping things running since." Vivian studied him cautiously. "Mr. Hawkins, my uncle's lawyer, didn't mention any manager." Isaac Reeves gave a small, tight smile. "Hawkins lives in Tucson. He doesn't know half of what goes on in Redemption Creek." As they spoke, another man walked past, deliberately clearing his throat before spitting in Vivian's direction. Isaac's expression darkened, but Vivian spoke before he could. "They've been doing that since I stepped off the train," she said quietly. "They spit when I pass." Something flashed in Isaac's eyes, anger, determination. He stepped closer to her side. "Then I'll walk so close they'll choke on dust," he stated firmly. True to his word, Isaac fell into step beside her, so close their shoulders nearly touched. He guided her toward the general store, glaring at anyone who dared look their way. "Why do they hate me?" Vivian asked as Isaac unlocked the store's front door. "They don't even know me." Isaac sighed as he pushed the door open. "It's not you personally, Miss Summers. Your uncle was well respected, but he was the only shopkeeper who refused to sell to the Barton Mining Company when they came to town 3 years ago. The Bartons want this property something fierce, and word got around that you might be selling." "I have no intention of selling," Vivian said, stepping into the dim interior of the store. Dust motes danced in the shafts of late afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows. "This is my inheritance, my fresh start." "Then you've made enemies before you've even unpacked," Isaac replied, lighting a lamp. "The Bartons own half this town now, and they want the rest." Vivian set her valise down and took in the shelves stocked with dry goods, tools, fabrics, and sundries. It was smaller than the department stores in Boston, but well organized and clean. "How many people work here?" "Just me now," Isaac said. "Used to be your uncle and 2 assistants, but since he fell ill." He trailed off, his expression somber. "I've been managing on my own for the past 3 months. And you've done a fine job, it seems," Vivian said, running her finger along a shelf, finding no dust. "Do you live nearby?" Isaac nodded toward the ceiling. "Your uncle let me take the small room at the back upstairs." "I should find new lodgings now that you're here." Vivian shook her head. "That won't be necessary. The place is big enough for both of us, I'm sure, and I could use someone who knows the business." She met his gaze directly. "Unless you'd prefer to leave." Something like relief flashed across his features. "No, madam, I'd like to stay." "Good," she said, extending her hand. "Then I believe we have an arrangement, Mr. Reeves." He took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "Isaac, please." "Vivian," she replied with a small smile. As the days passed, Vivian settled into a routine at Summers General Goods. Each morning, she would rise before dawn, dress in the simple, practical clothes she'd purchased to replace her Boston finery, and join Isaac in opening the store. The work was hard but satisfying, taking inventory, ordering supplies, serving customers. Isaac proved to be a patient teacher, showing her the books, introducing her to the regular customers who hadn't turned against her, and explaining the unique needs of a frontier community. But not everyone was welcoming. Each day brought some new slight whispers behind her back, women gathering their skirts as if to avoid contamination when she passed, men spitting tobacco juice near her feet when she walked down the street. As promised, Isaac often walked beside her, his tall frame a barrier between her and the town's hostility. One evening, as they were closing up, the bell above the door jingled and a well-dressed man entered. His suit was fine, if dusty from travel, and his mustache was waxed to sharp points. "Miss Summers," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Richard Barton at your service." He removed his hat with a flourish. "I believe my associates have spoken to you about selling this establishment." Vivian straightened her spine. "They have, Mr. Barton, and I've declined." Barton's smile tightened. "Perhaps you didn't understand the generosity of our offer. $5,000 is more than fair for a business in this location." Isaac moved to stand beside Vivian, his presence solid and reassuring. "The lady said she's not selling, Barton." Barton's gaze flicked to Isaac, dismissive. "This is business, Reeves, not your concern." "Mr. Reeves is my business partner," Vivian said firmly. "And as I've told your representatives twice now, Summers General Goods is not for sale, at any price." Barton replaced his hat, his expression hardening. "You're new here, Miss Summers. You don't understand how things work in Redemption Creek. This town needs progress, and Barton Mining brings progress." He looked around the store with disdain. "This place is a relic. You'd be wise to take the money before the offer changes." "Is that a threat, Mr. Barton?" Vivian asked, her voice steady despite the flutter of fear in her chest, simply advice from someone who knows the territory. Barton tipped his hat. "Good evening." After he left, Vivian let out a shaky breath. What did he mean by that? Isaac locked the door with more force than necessary. "Barton Mining has been buying up properties all over town. Those who won't sell find themselves facing difficulties." "What kind of difficulties?" Vivian asked. "Supply wagons that never arrive, wells that mysteriously dry up, accidents." Isaac's voice was grim. "Your uncle was one of the few who stood against them. After he refused to sell, he had a string of bad luck, broken windows, merchandise damaged in shipment. You think they were responsible?" Isaac shrugged. "Can't prove it, but timing's suspicious. Barton wants to expand his mining operation, and this location would give him control of the main street." Vivian paced the length of the counter. "Well, I'm not selling. This store was my uncle's life's work, and now it's mine." Isaac studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we'd better be ready for whatever comes next." They didn't have to wait long. The next morning, they arrived to find the store's front window shattered, glass littering the wooden sidewalk. "Probably just some rowdy drunks," Sheriff Mills said when they reported the vandalism, though his eyes slid away from Isaac's hard stare. "I'll look into it, but don't get your hopes up." As Isaac swept up the glass, Vivian noticed several women watching from across the street, whispering behind their hands. "Why does everyone in this town seem to hate me so much?" she asked, frustration finally boiling over. "I've done nothing to them." Isaac leaned on his broom, considering. "Partly it's because you're an outsider. Partly it's Barton's influence. He's got half the town in his pocket and the other half afraid of crossing him." He hesitated. "And partly it's because of rumors." Vivian stiffened. "Rumors about what?" "About you and me," Isaac said bluntly. "A single woman living in the same building as a single man, even with separate quarters. People talk." Vivian felt heat rush to her face. "That's absurd. We're business partners." "I know that," Isaac said quietly, "but this is a small town. Folks don't have much to do but gossip." Let them gossip then, Vivian said defiantly. I won't be bullied into selling, and I won't be bullied into propriety either. Isaac smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. You remind me of your uncle, he was just as stubborn. Good, Vivian said, then I'm in good company. Despite her brave words, the vandalism marked the beginning of a campaign of harassment. Deliveries were delayed or went missing. Customers dwindled as rumors spread that Vivian's goods were inferior or overpriced. Each day, the hostility in town seemed to grow. Yet amid the troubles, Vivian found unexpected allies. Martha Jenkins, the widow who ran the town's only restaurant, began stopping by with fresh baked bread and advice. Old Tom Wilson, who'd been friends with her uncle, brought his business to the store despite threats from Barton's men. And always, there was Isaac, steady, reliable, growing more indispensable by the day. She found herself watching him when he wasn't looking, the way his hands moved confidently as he stocked shelves. The lock of dark hair that fell across his forehead when he bent over the ledgers, the rare smile that transformed his serious face. She told herself it was gratitude she felt, nothing more, but when their hands brushed as they worked, the spark that jumped between them suggested otherwise. One evening, as Vivian was closing the books, the door burst open and Martha Jenkins rushed in, breathless. Vivian. There's a meeting at the town hall. Barton's trying to get the council to invoke eminent domain on this property, says the town needs the land for progress. Vivian and Isaac exchanged alarmed glances. Can they do that? Vivian asked. Not legally, Isaac said grimly, grabbing his hat. But Barton's got friends on the council. We need to be there. The town hall was packed when they arrived, with Barton holding court at the front of the room. He faltered momentarily when he saw Vivian and Isaac enter, then continued his speech about progress and the future of Redemption Creek. This obstruction to growth cannot continue, he was saying. Miss Summers refuses to acknowledge what's best for the town. She clings to outdated notions, holding back progress that could bring prosperity to all of us. That's a lie, Isaac called out, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. Barton doesn't care about the town's prosperity. He wants the store because it sits on a vein of silver that runs right under the building. A shocked hush fell over the room. Barton's face reddened. That's a preposterous accusation, Reeves. You have no proof. Don't I? Isaac reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. This is a geological survey commissioned by Henry Summers before he died. He suspected why Barton was so keen on his property and wanted confirmation. Vivian stared at Isaac in surprise. He'd never mentioned this to her. The survey confirms a significant silver deposit directly beneath Summers' general goods and extending under several adjacent properties. Isaac continued, handing the paper to Mayor Thompson. Barton knows it. That's why he's willing to pay $5,000 for a store that's worth half that. The room erupted in angry voices. Several property owners who had already sold to Barton shouted accusations of fraud. Mayor Thompson banged his gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. Is this true, Barton? The mayor demanded when the noise subsided somewhat. Barton's smile was strained. The mining potential of the region is well known. That's hardly a secret, nor is it fraud to negotiate fair market value for properties. Fair, Vivian stepped forward, finding her voice. There's nothing fair about vandalism, sabotage, and intimidation, Mr. Barton. Nothing fair about spreading lies to turn a town against me because I stand in the way of your profits. Careful with your accusations, Miss Summers, Barton warned, his voice low. Or what? Vivian challenged. More broken windows, more accidents? She turned to address the crowded room. My uncle built his store to serve this community. I intend to continue that legacy. Mr. Barton builds to serve himself. The choice seems clear to me. A slow wave of murmurs spread through the room. Vivian could see uncertainty on many faces, townspeople reconsidering their assumptions about her, about Barton. Mayor Thompson cleared his throat. In light of these revelations, I believe we should table the discussion of eminent domain until a full investigation can be conducted. Barton's face darkened with fury. You'll regret this obstruction, he said, glaring at Vivian and Isaac before storming out of the hall. As the meeting broke up, several townspeople approached Vivian, some apologetic, others curious, a few still suspicious. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a start. That was brave, Isaac said quietly as they walked back to the store through the deepening twilight, standing up to Barton in front of the whole town. I had help, Vivian replied, glancing at him. Why didn't you tell me about the survey? Isaac's expression was apologetic. Your uncle swore me to secrecy. He wanted to be certain before making accusations. He looked ahead at the darkened store. I should have told you sooner. I'm sorry. No more secrets between us, Vivian said firmly. We're partners, remember. Isaac nodded, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Partners. The word hung between them, laden with unspoken meaning as they reached the store. Isaac unlocked the door and they stepped inside. The familiar scent of coffee, leather, and paper enveloped them. We should celebrate our small victory, Vivian suggested impulsively. I think there's a bottle of my uncle's whiskey upstairs. Isaac raised an eyebrow but followed her up to the living quarters. Vivian found the whiskey in a cabinet and poured 2 small glasses. To standing our ground, she said, raising her glass. To partnerships, Isaac replied, his eyes never leaving hers as they drank. The whiskey burned pleasantly down Vivian's throat. She set her glass down, acutely aware of Isaac's presence, of how alone they were. I've been thinking, she said, struggling to maintain her composure, about what you said about the rumors. Forget it, Isaac said quickly. It doesn't matter what people say, but it does. Vivian moved closer to him, not because I care about their gossip, but because. She faltered, courage failing her. Because, Isaac prompted, his voice low. Vivian looked up at him, at the face that had become so dear to her in such a short time. Because perhaps there's some truth in what they suspect about how I feel about you. For a heartbeat, Isaac stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable. Then he closed the distance between them, one hand gently cupping her cheek. Vivian, he said, her name a prayer on his lips. When he kissed her, it was like coming home to a place she'd never been before, unfamiliar yet perfectly right. His arms encircled her, strong and protective, as her hands found their way to his shoulders, then his hair. When they finally parted, both breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since the day you arrived, he confessed. Vivian smiled. Even when I was a fancy Eastern lady who didn't know one end of a plow from the other, especially then. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. You were so determined, so brave, standing up to the whole town. I had you beside me, she reminded him. Close enough to make them choke on dust, remember? Isaac smiled, the expression transforming his face. I remember everything about that day. The way the sun caught in your hair when you stepped off the train, the way you held your head high despite their treatment. Vivian's heart swelled with emotion. Isaac, a crash from downstairs, interrupted them. They froze, listening. The sound of breaking glass was unmistakable. Stay here, Isaac whispered, reaching for the rifle he kept by the door. I will not, Vivian replied, grabbing a pistol from the drawer. At Isaac's surprised look, she added, My uncle taught me to shoot during his visits east. I'm quite good. A faint smile touched Isaac's lips despite the tension. Why am I not surprised? He murmured, then grew serious again. Stay behind me. They crept down the stairs, the wooden steps creaking despite their caution. The store lay in darkness, but moonlight spilled through the windows, illuminating overturned shelves and scattered merchandise. A match flared in the darkness. That's far enough, said a familiar voice. Richard Barton stood in the center of the store, the match in his hand hovering near a bundle of oil-soaked rags. 2 men flanked him, revolvers drawn. Barton, Isaac growled, his rifle half raised. You've gone too far. On the contrary, Barton said smoothly, I've only just begun. I offered you a fair price, Miss Summers. Now the price has changed. His eyes gleamed in the matchlight. Drop your weapons, or I drop this match and your precious store burns to the ground. Vivian's mind raced. The store was filled with flammable goods, lamp oil, dry goods, paper. If Barton started a fire, it would go up like tinder. Even if you burn us out, Vivian said steadily, you won't get the land, it will pass to my cousins back east. Barton's smile was cold. A tragic accident that claimed the lives of the obstinate storekeeper and her employee, very sad. But life goes on, and eventually someone sensible will sell. Isaac tensed beside Vivian. She knew he was calculating the odds 2 against 3 with the threat of fire complicating matters. "Lower your weapons," Barton repeated. "I won't ask again." Slowly, Isaac began to lower his rifle. Vivian followed suit with her pistol. "On the floor," Barton ordered. "Now." As they bent to place their weapons down, a shot rang out from the front door. One of Barton's men cried out, clutching his arm. All heads turned to see Sheriff Mills standing in the doorway, his revolver smoking. "That's enough, Barton," Mills said, his voice steady. "Drop that match, nice and easy." Barton hesitated, his face contorted with rage and calculation. "I wouldn't," Mills warned. "My deputy's outside with a shotgun trained on you through the window. You so much as twitch wrong and they'll be scraping you off the merchandise." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, with a curse, Barton extinguished the match between his fingers. "Hands up," Mills ordered. "All of you." He glanced at Vivian and Isaac. "Not you too." Just these sorry excuses for men. As Mills moved forward to disarm Barton and his accomplices, Vivian let out a shaky breath. Isaac's arm came around her shoulders, steadying her. "You're under arrest for attempted arson, breaking and entering, and I suspect about a dozen other crimes once we start digging," Mills told Barton as he cuffed him. "Town council's called an emergency meeting tomorrow. Seems they're very interested in reviewing all your business dealings, especially those property purchases." Barton's face was murderous as the sheriff led him and his men away. When the door closed behind them, Vivian sagged against Isaac. How did the sheriff know? She wondered aloud. "Martha Jenkins," Isaac said with a faint smile. "I saw her watching from her restaurant window when we came back from the town hall. She must have seen Barton and his men break in and sent for Mills." Vivian looked around at the ransacked store. "It will take days to clean this up." Isaac tipped her chin up, meeting her eyes. "We'll do it together. Partners, remember." The word held new meaning now, and Vivian smiled despite everything. "Partners," she agreed, rising on tiptoe to kiss him briefly. They spent the next hour securing the broken door as best they could, then retreated upstairs, too exhausted to do more. Despite the night's events, or perhaps because of them, Vivian slept soundly, safe in the knowledge that Isaac was just across the hall. Morning brought the town to their doorstep, not with hostility, but with helping hands. Martha Jenkins arrived first with breakfast and news that the town council had voted unanimously to investigate Barton's dealings. Close behind her came a stream of townspeople, some apologetic, others simply ready to work. By noon, the store was nearly restored to order. "Quite a turnaround," Vivian remarked to Isaac as they watched old Tom Wilson and his sons replace the broken window. "People respect courage," Isaac replied, "and they respect the truth. You showed them both." Mayor Thompson visited late in the afternoon, hat in hand. "Miss Summers, on behalf of the town council, I want to apologize for how you've been treated. It seems we were too quick to believe Barton's version of events." "What will happen to him?" Vivian asked. "He'll stand trial for his crimes here, and there's talk of federal charges for fraud related to the mining claims." The mayor cleared his throat. "In the meantime, the town council would like to officially welcome you to Redemption Creek. We're having a social at the church on Sunday. We'd be honored if you and Mr. Reeves would attend." After the mayor left, Vivian turned to Isaac with a bemused smile. "From pariah to honored guest in one day, this town changes its mind quickly. It's a fresh start," Isaac said, taking her hand, "for all of us." That evening, when the last of the helpers had gone and the store was quiet once more, Isaac led Vivian to the back porch. The sunset painted the desert in shades of gold and crimson, the vast landscape stretching endlessly toward the horizon. "Your uncle used to sit out here every evening," Isaac said, settling beside her on the bench. Said it reminded him of what was important, not the store or the silver under it, but this. He gestured to the breathtaking vista. "The beauty of this place, the freedom." Vivian leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his shoulder. "I think I understand why he loved it so much. Why he stayed despite everything." Isaac's arm came around her, drawing her closer. "And do you think you could love it too, stay despite everything?" Vivian turned to face him, reading the deeper question in his eyes. "I already do," she said softly. "Love it and other things besides." The hope that bloomed on Isaac's face was beautiful to behold. "Vivian," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "I know it's soon, and I'm just a shopkeeper without much to offer." She pressed a finger to his lips, stopping him. "You offered to walk so close they'd choke on dust," she reminded him. "You stood beside me when no one else would. That's worth more than all the silver under this store." Isaac caught her hand, kissing her palm before holding it against his heart. "I love you, Vivian Summers. I think I've loved you since you stepped off that train, head high despite their cruelty." "And I love you, Isaac Reeves," she replied, the words feeling right and true. "My partner in all things." When he kissed her, the last light of day painting them gold, Vivian knew she had found not just a new beginning, but a home. The months that followed brought many changes to Redemption Creek. Richard Barton was convicted and sentenced to prison. His mining company dissolved and its assets sold to repay those he had defrauded. The silver vein beneath Summers' general goods proved valuable enough to bring prosperity not just to Vivian and Isaac, but to the town as they hired local men to work the small mine they established behind the store. By Christmas, the hostile stares and whispers had been replaced by friendly greetings and invitations. The store thrived under their joint management, expanding to include a post office and telegraph service. And if anyone thought it improper that Isaac Reeves and Vivian Summers ran the business together, those concerns were silenced when the Reverend Johnson married them in a ceremony attended by the entire town. Summer came again to Redemption Creek, bringing with it the one-year anniversary of Vivian's arrival. To celebrate, Isaac closed the store early and surprised her with a picnic in the same spot where they had watched the sunset on the evening they confessed their love. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Reeves," he said, helping her down from the wagon. Vivian smiled at the name she was still getting used to. "Has it really been a year? Sometimes it feels like yesterday I stepped off that train." "And sometimes it feels like you've always been here," Isaac replied, spreading a blanket beneath the shade of a cottonwood tree. As they unpacked the picnic fried chicken from Martha's restaurant, fresh bread, and a bottle of wine, Vivian marveled at how much had changed. The hostile town had become home. The stranger beside her had become her husband, her partner, her heart. "What are you thinking?" Isaac asked, handing her a glass of wine. "I'm thinking about dust," Vivian said with a smile, "and spitting. And how sometimes the worst beginnings lead to the best journeys." Isaac's eyes softened. "I promised I'd walk close enough to make them choke on dust. I intend to keep that promise for the rest of our lives." "I'm counting on it," Vivian said, leaning into his embrace, "every step of the way." As the sun set on Redemption Creek, painting the desert in familiar gold and crimson, Vivian and Isaac watched in contented silence. The town behind them, once hostile and foreign, now glowed with the light of home. And as darkness finally fell, the stars emerged one by one, each a promise of all the tomorrows yet to come. For Vivian Summers Reeves, the Eastern lady who had arrived a stranger, and Isaac Reeves, the cowboy who had stood beside her when all others turned away, those tomorrows stretched out like the endless western sky, vast, bright, and full of possibility. Together they had found not just love, but belonging in a place that had once spit at her passing. And that, Vivian thought as she rested in her husband's arms beneath the star-filled sky, was a journey worth every difficult step. The following spring brought more changes to Summers General Goods, now officially renamed Reeves General Goods and Mining. The small silver mine behind the store had proven profitable enough to allow them to expand the building, adding a proper office and increasing their inventory to serve the growing town. Redemption Creek was changing too, growing from a dusty frontier settlement into a proper town with a schoolhouse, a bank, and even talk of a railway spur line connecting directly to Tucson. Many credited Vivian and Isaac for the transformation, their successful stand against Barton inspiring others to invest in the community's future rather than surrendering to outside interests. On a warm May morning, Vivian stood behind the counter, reviewing the ledger when Martha Jenkins bustled in, her round face alight with excitement. "It's official," she announced without preamble. The town council approved the funding for the new library, and they want to name it after your uncle, the Henry Summers Memorial Library. Vivian looked up, genuinely touched. That would have meant so much to him. He always said a town without books was like a body without a soul. And that's not all, Martha continued, leaning forward conspiratorially. They're talking about making Isaac the next mayor when Thompson retires next year. Vivian laughed. Isaac would hate that. You know how he feels about politics. Well, sometimes the best politicians are the ones who don't want the job, Martha said wisely. Speaking of your husband, where is he today? Overseeing a delivery at the mine, Vivian replied. He should be back by noon. She hesitated, then added with a small smile, Actually, I'm glad he's out for a while. I have a surprise for him, and I've been waiting for the right moment. Martha's eyes widened with understanding. Are you? Vivian nodded, her hand drifting to her still flat stomach. The doctor confirmed it yesterday. We're expecting a baby in November. Martha let out a delighted squeal and rushed around the counter to embrace Vivian. Oh, my dear, what wonderful news. Isaac will be over the moon. I hope so, Vivian said, returning the hug. I've been trying to think of the perfect way to tell him. He adores you, child. You could tell him while cleaning fish and he'd think it the most romantic moment of his life. Martha patted Vivian's cheek affectionately. But if you want my advice, sometimes the simple truths are best spoken plainly. After Martha left, Vivian found herself unable to concentrate on the ledger. Her mind kept drifting to the future, a child, their child, growing up in this place that had become so dear to her. Would it be a boy with Isaac's blue eyes and quiet strength? Or a girl with a spirit of adventure and determination? Either way, the child would be raised with love, surrounded by a community that had finally embraced them. The bell above the door jingled, pulling Vivian from her reverie. She looked up, expecting a customer, but instead found Isaac earlier than anticipated. His face was smudged with dust from the mine, but his smile when he saw her was as bright as ever. You're back early, Vivian said, coming around the counter to greet him. The delivery was straightforward, he replied, bending to kiss her. And I found myself missing my wife. The simple words, spoken with such honest affection after more than 6 months of marriage, still had the power to make Vivian's heart flutter. Your wife missed you too, she said, brushing dust from his shoulder. Though perhaps not the half of the desert you've brought back with you, Isaac laughed. Hazard of the trade, I'm afraid. He glanced around the empty store. Quiet today. It's been steady, actually, just a lull. Vivian hesitated, Martha's words about simple truths echoing in her mind. Isaac, there's something I need to tell you. His expression grew serious, attuned as always to the nuances of her voice. What is it? Vivian took his hands in hers, dust and all. Remember how you once promised to walk so close they'd choke on dust? Isaac nodded, a slight furrow appearing between his brows. I remember. Well, Vivian said, her voice softening, soon there will be 3 of us walking together. For a moment, Isaac stared at her uncomprehendingly. Then understanding dawned, his eyes widening. Vivian, are you saying? We're going to have a baby, she confirmed, her heart pounding with a mixture of nerves and joy. In November. Isaac stood frozen, his expression one of pure wonder. Then, with a whoop that startled a customer just entering the store, he swept Vivian into his arms, lifting her off her feet in a jubilant embrace. A baby, he repeated, his voice thick with emotion as he set her down gently. Our baby. The customer, seeing the intimate moment, discreetly retreated, letting the door close quietly behind him. Are you happy? Vivian asked, though his reaction left little doubt. Happy doesn't begin to describe it, Isaac said, one hand cradling her cheek while the other moved reverently to her waist. Vivian, you've given me everything I never dared dream of: a partnership, a home, your love, and now a family. His voice broke slightly on the last word. Vivian leaned into his touch, understanding the depths of what this meant to him. Isaac had been alone in the world since the age of 16, when his parents died of fever back in Texas. Family was a gift he had thought lost to him forever. Our child will never know the loneliness you did, she promised softly. They'll grow up surrounded by love, knowing exactly who they are and where they belong. Isaac pulled her close, his arms encircling her protectively. I'll be a good father, he vowed. I swear it, Vivian. This child will want for nothing I can give. I know, she said simply, because she did know. Isaac Reeves was a man of his word, steady as the mountains that ringed their valley. He would love their child with the same unwavering devotion he showed to her. That evening, after closing the store, they sat together on the back porch that had become their favorite spot for quiet moments. The desert stretched before them, painted in the familiar golds and crimsons of sunset, the land that had once seemed so foreign to Vivian now as beloved as the man beside her. "What should we name the baby?" Isaac asked, his hand resting lightly on her stomach. "If it's a boy, I thought perhaps Henry after my uncle," Vivian suggested. "Without him, we would never have found each other." Isaac nodded. "Henry Reeves, it's a good name, strong," he paused, thoughtful. "And if it's a girl," Vivian considered, "what was your mother's name?" "Eleanor," Isaac replied softly. "Eleanor Grace Reeves." "Then Eleanor for a girl," Vivian decided. "A name with history, with roots." "Roots are important," Isaac agreed, his gaze on the horizon. "I never thought I'd put down roots again after losing my family. Drifted for years before settling here, and even then I wasn't sure I'd stay." He turned to her, his eyes reflecting the sunset. "Until you," Vivian leaned against him, drawing strength and comfort from his solid presence. "I came here looking for a fresh start, never imagining I'd find so much more." She smiled up at him. "Though I'll admit when they started spitting as I passed, I had my doubts." Isaac chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her ear. "Their loss. Their rudeness brought me to your side, where I intend to remain." As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, they remained on the porch, planning and dreaming of the future that stretched before them, a future that had seemed impossible just a year ago, when a Boston lady stepped off a train into hostile territory, and a quiet shopkeeper promised to stand beside her. The summer passed in a blur of activity. The silver mine continued to produce steadily, allowing Isaac and Vivian to hire more workers from town. The store prospered, expanding its inventory to include luxuries previously unavailable in Redemption Creek fine fabrics, books, even a small selection of musical instruments. And as Vivian's pregnancy advanced, the town embraced the coming addition to their community with gifts and advice, some welcome, some less so. "Mrs. Peterson told me I should put a knife under the bed to cut the pain of childbirth," Vivian told Isaac one evening with a laugh. "And Mrs. Rodriguez brought me a special tea that she swears will ensure the baby has a sweet disposition." "Did you drink it?" Isaac asked, setting aside the ledger he'd been reviewing. "I did," Vivian admitted. "It can't hurt, and it actually tasted quite pleasant." She shifted uncomfortably on the sofa, trying to find a position that accommodated her growing belly. "Though at this point, I'd try anything that promised to make me less awkward." Isaac moved to sit beside her, gently lifting her feet into his lap and beginning to massage them. "You're not awkward," he said firmly. "You're magnificent." Vivian gave him a skeptical look, but couldn't help smiling at his unwavering admiration. Even as her body changed, Isaac's desire for her had never wavered, his touch and gaze as reverent as ever. "You're biased," she said, sighing with pleasure as his strong hands worked the ache from her arches. "Completely," he agreed cheerfully. "And I intend to remain so." November arrived with unexpected coolness, a brisk wind sweeping down from the mountains to rustle the few remaining leaves on the cottonwood trees. Vivian found herself restless, reorganizing the nursery they had prepared in what had once been Isaac's small room. Now expanded and brightened with fresh paint and curtains Martha had helped her sew. "The baby won't care if the blankets are folded just so," Isaac observed, finding her adjusting the cradle for the third time that morning. "I know," Vivian sighed. "I just need to keep busy. Dr. Foster says it could be any day now, and waiting is driving me to distraction." "Then let's go for a walk," Isaac suggested. "Just down to the creek and back, the fresh air will do you good." The walk was slow, Vivian's steps measured and careful, but the crisp air was indeed refreshing after days spent primarily indoors. The creek that gave the town its name was little more than a trickle this late in the year, but the banks were lined with rushes still stubbornly green despite the approaching winter. "I first knew I was falling in love with you right here," Isaac said as they paused to rest on a fallen log. About a week after you arrived. You'd had a particularly difficult day. Johnson's boys had overturned a barrel of molasses in the store, and Mrs. Elliot had made that cutting remark about Eastern women having no place on the frontier. Vivian remembered the day well. I was ready to pack my bags and take the next train east, she admitted. But you didn't, Isaac continued. Instead, you came here alone. I followed, worried about you walking out by yourself with tensions high in town. I found you sitting right about here, not crying as I'd expected, but making a list. Vivian smiled at the memory. A list of improvements for the store, starting with moving the molasses barrels to a more secure location. You were angry and frustrated, but you channeled it into something constructive. That's when I knew. Vivian squeezed his hand. And when did you know you were going to marry me? Isaac's smile was slow and sure. The day you stood up to Barton at the town hall. You were magnificent, brave, and righteous, and so beautiful in your anger. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. I decided that night that if we survived Barton's schemes, I'd ask you to be my wife. And here we are, Vivian said softly, her hand resting on her rounded belly where their child grew. About to, she broke off suddenly, her eyes widening. Vivian, Isaac's voice sharpened with concern. I think, she said carefully, that we should start back to town now. Understanding dawned immediately. Isaac stood, helping her to her feet with gentle urgency. Is it time? Vivian nodded, a mixture of excitement and apprehension washing over her. I believe so. They made their way back toward town, pausing twice as contractions gripped Vivian. By the time they reached the store, there was no doubt. Isaac helped her upstairs, then ran to fetch both Dr. Foster and Martha Jenkins, who had promised to assist with the birth. The hours that followed tested Vivian's strength and resolve as nothing in her life ever had. Not the journey west, not standing against Barton, not even those first difficult weeks in a hostile town. The pain was like fire, consuming and relentless. Yet through it all, Isaac remained by her side, defying convention to hold her hand and wipe her brow, his steady presence an anchor in the storm of childbirth. As dawn broke over Redemption Creek, Isaac Grace Reeves entered the world with a powerful cry, her tiny fists clenched as if ready to fight for her place from the very beginning. She's perfect, Dr. Foster announced, placing the swaddled infant in Vivian's exhausted arms. Strong lungs, good color, you have a healthy daughter, Mrs. Reeves. Vivian gazed down at the small, red face, overcome with a love so fierce and protective it took her breath away. Hello, Isaac, she whispered. We've been waiting for you. When she looked up at Isaac, she saw tears tracking unashamedly down his face. He reached out a tentative finger to touch his daughter's cheek, his expression one of reverence. She's so small, he marveled, so perfect. Would you like to hold her? Vivian asked. Isaac hesitated, suddenly uncertain. I don't want to hurt her. You won't, Vivian assured him, carefully transferring the bundle to his arms. The sight of her strong husband cradling their tiny daughter with such tender care made Vivian's heart swell. Isaac looked down at Isaac with a mixture of awe and fierce protectiveness that mirrored Vivian's own feelings. Hello, little one, he murmured. I'm your father. His voice caught on the word. And I promise no one will ever spit when you pass. You'll walk with your head high always. In that moment, watching the man she loved make this solemn vow to their newborn daughter, Vivian knew with absolute certainty that they had found something rare and precious, not just love, but a true partnership, a shared purpose, a family built on respect and devotion. As winter settled over Redemption Creek, the Reeves family established new rhythms around Isaac needs. Isaac proved to be a devoted father, as comfortable walking the floor with a fussy infant at midnight as he was negotiating mining contracts. Vivian recovered her strength gradually, amazed at how completely one small person could rearrange their lives and priorities. By spring, when Isaac was nearly 6 months old and Redemption Creek was awash in wildflowers after unusually heavy rains, Vivian stood on the back porch of the store, her daughter in her arms, watching Isaac inspect a new shipment of goods. Isaac reached out pudgy hands toward her father, babbling excitedly. I think someone wants your attention, Vivian called. Isaac looked up, his face breaking into the smile he reserved exclusively for his wife and daughter. He set down the crate he'd been examining and came to join them, taking Alina into his arms with practiced ease. "What is it, princess? Are you supervising your old pa's work?" Alina grabbed at his beard, a recent addition that Vivian had initially been skeptical of, but had grown to appreciate. "I was thinking," Vivian said as they watched a hawk circle lazily overhead, "about how much has changed in 2 years." "All for the better," Isaac said, bouncing Alina gently as she began to fuss. "Yes," Vivian agreed, "though not the way I expected when I stepped off that train. I thought I was coming to run a store, maybe build a quiet life away from Boston society. I never imagined all of this." She gestured to encompass not just their flourishing business and home, but the town beyond, which had transformed from hostile territory to beloved community. Isaac shifted Alina to his shoulder, his free arm coming around Vivian. "Life rarely goes as expected, sometimes it's harder." He pressed a kiss to Vivian's temple. "Sometimes it's infinitely better." A customer called from the front of the store and Isaac reluctantly handed Alina back to Vivian. "Duty calls," he said with a smile. As he walked away, Vivian held her daughter close, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair. "Your father is right, little one," she murmured. "Sometimes life gives you exactly what you need, even when it's nothing like what you thought you wanted." Alina gurgled in response, her small hands patting Vivian's cheeks as if in agreement. From hostile stares and spitting to love and family, from isolation to community, from uncertainty to purpose, the journey had been unexpected in every way. Yet standing there with her daughter in her arms, watching her husband move with confident purpose through the business they had built together, Vivian wouldn't have changed a single step. For this was the truth she had learned in Redemption Creek. Sometimes the most beautiful journeys begin with the most difficult first steps. And sometimes when someone spits as you pass, the right person walks so close they choke on dust, and in doing so, changes the path of your life forever.